Hello, my name is Andrew Bzowicki, and I'm a clinical associate professor at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Pharmacy, and I'm also a member of the editorial board at the Currents in Pharmacy Teaching and Learning Journal. I'd like to spend some time today to talking with you about what it means to provide a high quality peer review and things that you may be able to do in order to help increase the quality of the reviews that you are currently providing, or if you're a new reviewer, ways that you may actually be able to improve your skill set. As a little bit of a background, thinking about where the profession of pharmacy is and where the pharmacy education is, we have seen a considerable growth in evolution over the last couple of years and decades. And similarly, peer-reviewed literature has followed the same over multiple different disciplines. We do see a lot more open access publishing and online publication of articles, and including journals that are entirely online, which has helped increase the number of journals that are available and increase the number of places where you can have your materials published. But then also it's removed some of the page limits or some of the limits on the number of issues in a specific volume or number of articles in a specific issue of a journal. So we are seeing a lot more literature that is able to be published, disseminate more information, and potentially do it even quicker. However, it's still important from the editor's perspective to make sure that these manuscripts remain high quality, and that does rely very heavily on peer reviewers that are assisting the journal to ensure the quality of the manuscripts, and also to help with the ultimate decisions on whether an article needs to be accepted, modified, minor or significant revisions, or unfortunately sometimes rejected. Unfortunately, there's really no reference for what a quality peer review is. There's been some preliminary evidence looking at different markers and different measures, but there's no consensus really around what quality means. And so we compiled the study team, including Kristen Yahnke from the University of Minnesota, myself, and then Andrew Trainer at the Concordia University in Wisconsin, to really kind of tackle this issue to see if there was anything that we could do to help with pharmacy education. The methods of the study we're going to go through today really focused around one research question, and that was, what are the characteristics of peer reviews and peer reviewers that editors seek in order to aid in enhancing manuscript quality and making editorial decisions. So what we really wanted to do was look at the attributes of the peer review itself, the review that's submitted to the journal, and also a peer reviewer. What is it that the peer reviewer does, or what characteristics, attributes does the peer reviewer have that help the editor provide a good decision and make sure that they're ensuring the quality of their manuscripts. Similarly, we wanted to look at what might be some valuable elements in developing a training program in order to help pharmacy practice residents, postgraduate students, and even new faculty to make sure that they can help self-develop in this area and to provide high-quality peer reviews. For the methods, we looked at where are different pharmacy practice and pharmacy admin faculty publishing in different types of journals. And so we had over 540 publications from 70 different faculty members after reviewing, where are people publishing from each of our institutions over the last 15 years. And so in order to help narrow this down a little bit to what are the most high impact from our perspective of the purposes of this study, we looked at those journals where at least 10 publications happened by at least 2 different institutions. So ultimately, these are the places where pharmacy practice and pharmacy administration faculty are most commonly publishing. And so ultimately, we did identify 9 different journals, of which one declined to participate, so we ended with 8 journals. We reached out to each of those journals individually to see who within their editorial staff should be included in the invitation. So we were looking for people that were actively managing manuscripts, receiving manuscripts, sending them out for peer review, receiving them from peer review, working with the authors, working with the reviewers to make sure that manuscripts were being developed and moving forward. And so these were the folks that we wanted to include in our project. As part of our methods, we use the Delphi process. So this is a way of gathering a group of content experts in a specific area, asking very open questions in the beginning to try and develop some consensus around some major themes, major ideas, and then ultimately over subsequent rounds, more clarifying questions and more narrow questions are asked to try and make sure that we are again representing the perspective of the group as a whole. And so in the very beginning, there were 4 overarching questions that were asked of participants to really just kind of get a good idea of where we're starting. What makes a good peer reviewer? What makes for a good peer review? What is it that reviewers do? What might be some indicators of a quality peer review? And thinking about those things very broadly. Surveys were completed confidentially and independently. The results were analyzed by us on the research team to really look for themes. What are some themes that we identified? What are some of the overarching ideas that came from the group? And ultimately a report was created and sent back out to the group for round 2. And in this group it was looking at, these are the ideas that came from the group. What's most important? What's least important? What has a high return on investment? What might not be as worthwhile to invest in, to try and kind of prioritize some of these different themes that were identified. Lastly, in the third round, there were some clarifying questions asked. So mainly, what are some of the importance of the indicators of peer reviewer knowledge? How important is it for a peer reviewer to be knowledgeable in a certain area versus other areas or skills? Different elements of the review, how important is one element versus another? Again, to try and kind of prioritize some of the pieces of a review. It is important to note that consensus was prospectively defined as 75% of participants, and so that helped us to decide, what had been achieved, what consensus was achieved in certain areas compared to other parameters. So one of the first things you might be thinking of is, as a relatively newer peer reviewer, or maybe you've never performed peer review before, do I know enough? What can I contribute as a new peer reviewer? And so of those that responded, majority looked at confidence in the area, sufficient to provide a peer review, and then current understanding of literature in the area. So those 2 pieces really ranked the highest in terms of what's required for a quality peer review. So if you feel confident in an area enough, you're aware of what's going on, that is going to hold the most weight of all of the different elements. If you look further down below, experiencing with reviewing manuscripts is helpful, but the only way to do that is to go through this process multiple times. So as a new reviewer, that's not necessarily as helpful. But if you have teaching, research, service experience, a publication record in a specific area, all of those things can be helpful, but don't think that you have to have multiple different manuscripts or multiple different teaching opportunities in an area to really be able to provide a good review. The 2 pieces that are most important would be your understanding of the literature in a specific area, and then confidence in the area sufficient to provide a peer review. So this might be what you're thinking of when you're signing up to review for a journal. You often have to provide keywords or content areas. And so really think about, what content areas do you know the literature fairly well, you have a good understanding about, and where do you feel confident to do? And that would be the best place to start. The next thing to think about would be characteristics that might enhance quality or assist decisions. So you'll see in the middle column here, you've got enhancing manuscript quality and certain elements that may be required or that might be helpful. And you'll notice that the 2 that ranked highest for required were knowledgeable in the content area they are reviewing, and then being able to provide specific feedback. Providing specific feedback is essential. So it's really difficult for an author or for an editor to understand what needs to be changed if you can't provide specific feedback for elements. Sometimes it could be very specific for a certain paragraph or a certain sentence, and sometimes it's geared more towards a specific section within a paper. But being able to provide as specific feedback as possible is extremely helpful for helping out with the manuscript quality. If you look on the right side here, so in helping with the editorial decision, both of those elements are required from the perspectives of our group to help assist with that editorial decision. But some other elements that were also weighted fairly highly in terms of being helpful were avoiding self-promoting behaviors, so being careful not to recommend either citing manuscripts that you've written or that you've participated in, or trying to kind of find ways to manipulate the manuscript in a certain way that might help promote yourself. Having a connection to the reader's journalship is extremely important, the journal's readership, and then also being timely in your actions. So, if you think about it, being timely is not important for manuscript quality, but is extremely critical to help the editor keep things on track, keep things on time, and to make sure that authors don't have to wait too long to get their reviews back so that they're able to keep moving forward with the publication process. Knowing who's reading the journal is extremely important too, because you're thinking about it from that lens when you're reviewing a manuscript. What is it that the presenters or the readers of this journal want to know about and to them. Next, looking at requirement of feedback on specific components. So you might be thinking, well, should I comment on everything? Should I comment on individual pieces? And so this has been really divided into two areas, always required or required really only if there's a problem. So if you notice on the left side, the elements that are always required to be commented on are those that achieved or at a high percentage were methods and results. Over 50% of both of the editors agreed in both of these areas that really methods and results are the areas you should provide some feedback on, whether it's all positive, things are very good, whether there's something constructive in there. That's the main kind of area of the paper that often can use a little bit of improvement. So making sure it's clear, making sure it's concise, making sure it's consistent throughout the manuscript. On the right side, you'll see areas that might only be required if there's a problem. So for example, the title. Oftentimes the title isn't really the most important thing to comment on. But if the title is misleading, if the title doesn't match what the manuscript is, or if there's some sort of inconsistency there, that's important to make a comment on. Same deal with the preparation or presentation. So if it just doesn't quite fit within the existing literature, or something's not quite presented well, then that's something that should be commented on. But otherwise, if there's no major problems with it, not necessarily something that needs to be commented on every single time you provide a review. In this next table here, we have specific recommendations for improvements. So similarly, we've got always required on one side and then required only for problems on the other. And I just highlight, again, the areas that were represented by a majority of the population that we studied. And so a clear, specific recommendation of a publication decision was very highly rated by all of our participants, in addition to a clear description of revisions that are needed or required. So being very clear, being specific, should this manuscript be accepted, rejected, accepted with significant revisions, accepted with minor revisions, what do you feel needs to be done? And being very clear about that is essential for the author to know what they need to do, but also for the editor to know what needs to happen. On the right side, you'll see required only for problems. And so you'll see down below suggestions to improve the readability of the manuscript. Most manuscripts are fairly readable, and so it's not really something that you would comment on. Very rarely would you say, this manuscript was very readable, thank you. However, if there's a problem, if there is an issue with being able to read the manuscript from, sentence to sentence, paragraph to paragraph, whatever the issue may be, whether it be a language barrier, whether it be just overall flow of the presentation of the information, where the tables, how they correlate with the text, whatever it might be, if there's issues with the readability, that scored very highly as needing to be commented on. Again, only if there's a problem. Next, we look at peer review. So characteristics of the review that can enhance quality of the manuscript, but then also assist the editor with their decisions. And similarly to a previous slide, if it enhances manuscript quality is in the middle, and then assisting with that editorial decision is on the right side. So if we look at our highest rated elements here, and if you notice, most of these were rated as, if you look at required and helpful, you achieve almost 100% for each of these elements. But really, again, the peer review should speak to the manuscript's utility in the literature, So does this manuscript provide anything new? Does it fill an existing gap? Does it help us answer any new questions that may have been developed from previous literature? What's the utility of this manuscript relative to what we already know about a certain topic? It should also have a detailed analysis of article sections, so breaking the paper down section by section, thinking about the earlier slide that talked about what's always required versus required only if there's a problem, factoring that in. So spending more time on areas that need a little bit more help and maybe focusing a little bit less in terms of your analysis of areas that don't really need a whole lot of assistance. On the right side, things that are helpful for that quality piece, the global assessment or big picture of the article. So again, what is your perspective of this manuscript relative to the big picture of current literature, but then also to practice as well. Feedback on technical writing is important, but leaving the specifics of grammar, punctuation, and spelling to copy editors. This was something, again, that was helpful or required, but majority said helpful. It did reach consensus on both elements. But you'll find that many times these manuscripts go to copy editing after your review. So really, as a peer reviewer, you are focused on the technical knowledge, so the things that you're the expert in, whether it be the content area that is published, what the existing literature says, where the gaps might be. Those are the areas that you're really providing commentary on. Anything that's grammar, punctuation, very often is deferred to a copy editor later on. Again, unless there's just an overall problem with readability, and that's where it would be appropriate to make a comment, a global comment that states modifications might need to be made to ensure the readability of a manuscript. Looking at helping with the editorial decision, similarly, so helping requirements for aiding with the editorial decision, top two elements again for sure, speaking to the utility in the literature, and then also containing a detailed analysis of each individual section. But then also, again, go back to those clear recommendations for actions to the editor. Be clear with the editor. Let him or her know what needs to be done, in your opinion, to make this manuscript worthwhile or make it be something that contributes to the literature. On the right side, you've also got the helpful elements are identical to what would help enhance quality as well. Lastly, one of the things to think about would be self-development strategies. So what can you do as an individual reviewer to help improve your skills or improve your knowledge? And this is a great place to start. You're currently on the Currents Pharmacy Teaching and Learning peer reviewer development modules, and so this is a great place to get started to develop your skills. The highest return on investment, according to the editors we surveyed, was really just doing reviews. Is really the most beneficial most beneficial element you can do to help ensure your knowledge and skills in providing peer review. Similarly, you can review the journal guidelines, review expectations, do some reading to make sure that you know what you're doing, what the format is, and how you should be providing your feedback. That's always a given. Knowing what's expected of you is helpful. Asking for feedback is something else that could be really high return on investment. It may not necessarily be feedback from the journal themselves, but maybe you work with a mentor or a peer or someone else that has more experience with peer review, and just asking, this was the peer review I submitted. What do you think? Did it hit the nail on the head? Would you have written similarly? Would you have written something differently? Thinking about different ways to approach peer review. Similar to that, reading the review of others. And so if you're able to obtain someone else's peer review or see what was happened or what they provided to the journal when they did a peer review, that can be helpful as well to make sure that you're providing work that's in line and that your quality is very similarly. Things that were rated as kind of a medium return on investment would be obtaining writing experience, in general, so getting more practice writing could be one element to think about. Also reviewing with others can be very beneficial. I believe that there'd probably be more value if you were asking for feedback, reading reviews of others, and reviewing with others, compiling the three of those together in a structured format could be extremely helpful. But then also conducting other types of reviews, so whether it be poster abstracts or other uh, um, submissions that might require peer review that aren't necessarily full manuscripts, might be something else that would be of benefit to you. So that was just an overall summary of our research project that we had done looking at peer review quality. For more information, I do have the citation here for the manuscript, and it has all of the tables. It has some further information included within the text, including potentially some ways to look at developing a peer review training program to try and enhance your skills and work through the peer review process. Thank you very much for your attention.